Friends, and welcome back to a new season of the Afros and Knives podcast, the interview series featuring Black women working in food and beverage, wine, hospitality, food tech and science, agriculture, food justice, and food media. I am your host and the protector of this audio space, Tiffany Rosier. I am a chef, a food writer, and an entrepreneur. This season, our conversations will reach into the past as well as explore the future of Black food through the lens of Black women. What is possible? How can we innovate? What risks can we take? And what risk should we take? What stories can we tell, and how can we tell them in fresh ways? We are kicking off the season in conversation with Black and Indigenous women working in food and food justice. So Charity Blanchett, Vanessa Parrish, and Halil Echohawk. This first conversation is with Charity Blanchett, founder and creative director of The Dipping Spoon, a startup nonprofit organization whose mission is identifying and cultivating the next generation of Indigenous and Black women identifying non-binary GNC and femme culinary youth by providing and empowering those exact chefs with a fully paid culinary scholarship, housing, and externships to the New Orleans Culinary and Hospitality Institute. Dipping Spoon is committed to sending aspiring chefs from Alaska, Hawaii, and New Orleans to Nochi. So Dipping Spoon is providing education, mentorships, and empowerment for all their recipients so they can become creative, imaginative, skilled leaders in the culinary world. Charity is a recent awardee of the Vital Voices and Tresemme Women's Leadership Incubator Fellowship Program, as well as a James Beard Foundation Owning It leadership grad. So you can follow Charity, and you can also follow The Dipping Spoon across the internet and across all of the social medias. You can learn more about the work by visiting their website, thedippingspoon.org, and of course follow them on social media at The Dipping Spoon. You can follow Charity at, Charity Blanchett on Instagram. So please be sure to follow and support their work and their goals and just kind of watch their story unfold. Again, welcome to the new season. I hope everyone is excited. I am excited. There are some very cool things coming up this season. Be sure to visit the website frequently to find out what's new and what's there. There's going to be a lot of just added benefit and value for podcast listeners. You can also be sure to, of course, follow us on social media at Afros and Knives, and that's on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Be sure to sign up for the newsletter. Goes out every week with our guests that are featured. Also news from the community, and just other special features that are near and dear to my heart that you might be interested in following. Two very new things that are happening this season is, number one, we're going to add video, so you'll be seeing some video podcasts as well, and there will be a membership. There'll be some new memberships on the Afros and Knives website, so it'll work a bit like Patreon, but I'll be able to add a lot more value to you as a listener. So keep your eyes on the website to find out when those memberships open up. There will be, membership perks will be things like workshops or master classes from some of our previous guests, from myself, extra footage, video access to certain episodes, previews, and all types of things. So the more things I can think of, trust me, the more things I'll add. And of course, there'll be special merch and designs for specific for members as well. So you're going to want to definitely get a membership there. If you are currently a Patreon member, don't worry about moving your stuff over. I'll be duplicating a lot of the same content onto Patreon, so you won't lose anything. So you can stay put right where you are. So yeah, be sure to just, follow up, check us out. Definitely stay engaged. I love how engaged this community is. You guys definitely talk back and are actively supportive. So I always appreciate that. And thank you so much for 3 seasons so far. I think this season is definitely going to be equally exciting and interesting. And so yeah, thank you to all the guests. I'm just going to thank you in advance. And for all the women who have jumped on and spent some time with me and shared their stories with me, I am so deeply grateful and humbled that you choose to do so. So I am ready to go. I hope you guys are ready to go. So let's get into this first interview with Charity.
My name is Charity Blanchett. I was born and raised in Alaska, of all places. I was born in Anchorage and was raised in a little town called Wasilla, which is about an hour suburb outside of Anchorage, which is Alaska's largest city. I come from a very interesting and I feel dynamic background. I am Indigenous Alaskan Native and Yupik Eskimo, and I am also Black. My father came to Alaska through the military after Vietnam, and he fell in love and never left. And my mother was born and raised in Alaska in a little tiny village at the mouth of the Kuskokwim River called Tuntatuliak, a little village at the time when she was born of 300 people. And she ended up meeting my father somewhere down the line. And I come from a very big, large family. I have 5 brothers and 1 sister. When I was 15 years old, my parents adopted my little sister from birth. So I was the only girl for a good while. I grew up in a very, almost basically religious household. My parents both had full-time jobs, but they were also both pastors, and they were ordained in the AME Zion Church, African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church. So when I was a little kid, I just called it Black Church because everyone was Black, and it was very rare to have families in Wasilla that were Black or mixed. So we would drive an hour to Anchorage, and we would go to church there. And my mother made history by becoming the first Indigenous woman ordained in the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church. So that's something I'm very proud of, and that's something she is certainly proud of as well. Living in Wasilla was very interesting, especially growing up as a biracial child in a very, very white town. I remember when I was in elementary school, you could kind of count how many brown families there were on one hand, and my family pretty much encompassed all of them due to how large our family was. And it was very, very interesting growing up in Wasilla. And to give context to Wasilla, Sarah Palin was our mayor. So I remember when I was in 5th grade, that's when the Spice Girls were huge, and I was obsessed with the Spice Girls. And Sarah was canvassing door to door. This is when she ran her first campaign and was running for mayor of Wasilla. And she showed up at our house wearing platform-looking Spice Girl shoes. And I was so intrigued at this woman, like, who is this woman canvassing for mayor? So that just gives context to kind of what our town was like, because I feel like most people know who she is in the world now.
Wow.
That was a very interesting time. I do remember waking up early that morning thinking that the news line that I read was a joke, and then I realized it was not a joke.
Yeah. Sarah was an interesting entrance into the world of politics.
In my household, my dad definitely made sure that all my life, I've always known that I am a proud Black woman. My dad recorded every single episode of The Cosby Show, Different World, and on VHS. And my brothers and I would rewatch those VHS tapes over and over and over from kindergarten up until I graduated high school, whether it was in the summertime, Christmas break, spring break, any break we had. And I'm so thankful and grateful that he did that, because I feel like for a girl who grew up in Alaska, which is really far away from the lower 48, access was really limited in terms of hanging out with people that look like you. And so to see representation from such a young age, that was something my dad made sure that his children saw. and we were privy to, had access to. And then, of course, being baptized in the AME Zion Church. Both of my godparents are pastors in the AME Zion Church. And so I always knew that I was a little Black girl from Wasilla. But we lived in a very Indigenous household, growing up with traditional Native foods. Even though my mother lived so far away from the village that she grew up in, our freezer was stocked with all of her Indigenous food, her Native food. And we ate those. We ate all the food, whether it was American food mixed in with Native food. And we were always feasting and gathering. And so I feel like my first foray into the food world certainly just comes from my culture. And also having a large family. There were birthdays all the time. And anytime there was a birthday, my mom would go crazy ham and would have a huge spread of food. She basically would do Thanksgiving all over again. So there would be a turkey, cranberry sauce, all the things, all the trimmings. And then she would have another table full of all her Native foods. So it'd be dry fish, salmon, fried bread, Eskimo ice cream, which we call a gudok, like just all these really yummy things. And there was never a shortage of food in our household, in our freezer, especially because I had so many brothers. So my mom made sure there was lots of food for my brothers. They could eat so much food. I don't know where it went, but they just ate and ate and ate. But that was also my mother's love language as well, was being in the kitchen and cooking. And I remember being little and watching her and always wanting to help her, but she would always say, no, I'm fine. And I realized that was her way of saying, child, get out of the way. If you help me, you're just going to slow me down. And I'm so happy, though, that she said no, because I feel just from observing her in the kitchen, that's where I learned so much about cooking and watching her hands. I'm actually quite attracted to hands and the way they move and work and all the things. And so watching my mother handle not only, I guess, like Western food, but her Indigenous Native food. I mean, my mom everything was raw. It was real. It was visceral. She'd be handling raw meat, breaking down a fish, breaking down a bird, all the things. She was never afraid, and things that would feel kind of texturally different or say slimy. I mean, I remember when I was a little kid feeling my first fish. That's a very slimy feeling in your hands, but when your mom's like, no, when I was a girl, this is what we did at fish camp. This is what we ate. This is who you are. My children are not going to be afraid of touching fish, of touching anything that's raw, because that's life. Life's raw. And so I feel my mom, she's a very sassy woman. And, but watching her in the kitchen and integrating what she grew up with in a small town city setting like Wasilla, even though it was very tiny. So having that cultural identity in our household, I was very proud, and I'm so thankful and grateful for my parents instilling that you're a proud Black woman and you're a proud Yupik Eskimo. And it was interesting at school because Wasilla, it's like I said, it's very white, and we definitely received our fair share of racism. But I think because of how strong my parents were and them reminding us all the time that we are kings, we are queens. My native tribe is Yupik. The meaning of Yupik is it's literally real people. So all my life, I've been taught that you are the real people. We come from this land. We are kings and queens. You are a bloodline of royalty. No one can take that away from you. And that is something that I've certainly carried on into my adult life. It hasn't been easy, but, when I feel like I lose track of who I am as a woman of color, I just remember my bloodline, my ancestry, where I come from. And that means so much to me. And growing up in Wasilla, my parents were subscribed to every single magazine in terms of, say, Ebony, Jet, Essence. And then my mom had all the fashion magazines. So I was accessing the world from so far away, through magazines, through books, Natural Geographic workbooks. My mind was always daydreaming and traveling. And I was cutting out pictures of different places I wanted to live, or clothes I wanted to wear, food I wanted to eat. And so I think that that intrinsically is who I am. I'm a very creative spirit. I feel like because I really enjoy creativity and the creative arts and things, I think it's because of what I had access to via my parents. And I think that goes back to food, because food itself, I believe that chefs are artists. They're inherently creative. So why inhibit art? And so anyways, fast forwarding to now where I'm at in life and the creation of the Dipping Spoon Foundation, where we cultural and gender representation is at the forefront of why I started the foundation. And it just goes back to access. My dad made sure his children had access to things that maybe we wouldn't have access to. And so now in my adult life, I'm making sure that, the Dipping Spoon Foundation, we're a startup nonprofit organization, and our mission is identifying and cultivating the next generation of Indigenous and Black women identifying non-binary, non-gender conforming, femme culinary youth by providing and empowering our aspiring chefs with fully paid culinary scholarships to the New Orleans Culinary and Hospitality Institute. New Orleans, Louisiana is where I currently live now. And our scholarship encompasses what I believe is inclusive connection, and that's housing. As they're going to school full time, they'll also be working full time with partnered restaurants, and then adding more to that is mental health. And I believe we're living in a world now where we're really seeing that mental health means so much, and so I added a mental health element to our scholarship foundation, where while our recipients are going to school, they will be seeing the exact same healthcare professionals that I see, going to school full time. That's its own journey. And then working full time, studying. If you're an Indigenous or Black student that's from Alaska or say from Hawaii, and I'm bringing you to New Orleans, like that's a whole nother cultural shock. So I believe mental health and self-care is definitely a huge component of our programming. And so it's very important to me to be able to, like I said, provide access to our recipients. And also it goes back to the meaning of hospitality. That's anticipating someone else's needs before they realize they need it. And so as I created the foundation, I'm anticipating what are our recipients going to need by the time they get to New Orleans. They have a place to live, they're in school, they have a job. Upon the first 2 weeks of living there, they'll have a grocery cart where they can go grocery shopping. And then after that, that's why you're working, so you can go out and, learn that life skill of budgeting, managing your life, and creating autonomy within who you are. So I'm so excited for the future and where we're going.
Well, I was reading through your bio on the website for Dipping Spoon Foundation, and it's always interesting for me, like the bridge for people from like what their life before food and their life after food, because there's a very distinct line from being kind of an involved eater to a person who's really part of the community and part of the industry, like until you've kind of immersed yourself into that world. You consume, you sit and you go to restaurants and you go to places and you eat, and you might have some curiosity about like, oh, how did this dish come about? But when you're on the other side of that door and you know what it's like to be on a line or, be a part of a dinner service or a part of a culinary team or a hospitality team, it becomes a very different world. So when I was looking at your bio, and it was, it talks about your this foray into bodybuilding, which my younger brother, that's what he does. And I have like 3 or 4 cousins, like they are athletes from day one. And so most of them are either training to be a part of a bodybuilding competition, want to be a part of a bodybuilding competition, or they work out like they're going to be a part of a bodybuilding competition. So I thought that was like incredible. I was like, okay, this for me it's the path is always so interesting. So from that, and then of course leaving home and finding yourself going south into Los Angeles or finding yourself in Hawaii. When did your curiosity kind of build to like that fever pitch where it was time to go?
So I lived in Alaska all my life, and ever since I was a little girl, like I said, going back to, the access and seeing all these, hanging up all these pictures and reading all these books. I always knew Alaska. I love it. I love my family. I love nature, but I also love hot weather. And I definitely knew at some point that I wanted to leave, but it took a long time. And it wasn't until I turned 30 and I had a relationship that had just ended. I was working for a boutique cycle studio that I just felt like there was no path upward. Health and fitness has been a huge part of my life, but I realized that I didn't want it to be something that was career oriented. I'd rather do that for my own self-care. And so one day I was like, you know what? Alaska no longer serves me. And 30 years old is when I felt like a woman. And I remember at the time not being able to articulate what that meant. I just knew that I was a woman and Alaska doesn't serve me anymore, so I'm ready to leave. And so I moved to Hawaii, and my parents retired to Hawaii years before that. And so we kind of traded places. It was a little too hot for them in the summertime. So they went back to Alaska, and then I stayed at their place for 3 months, figuring out what my next, move was. And so I lived in Hawaii and kind of beach bummed for a little bit because I spent my entire 20s working, co-founded some businesses here and there, and just really trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And so, went from cold climate to a hot and humid climate. To me, the ultimate luxury in life has been to have the mountains and the ocean at my disposal. And that is what Hawaii offers to me. I believe saltwater heals. And I thought I moved to Hawaii to live and die there. And I actually only ended up living there for 3 months. And I had a job transfer at the time to Los Angeles, which was only supposed to be for about a month. And I stayed with my then boss at the time. And my very first week in Los Angeles, my boss bought tickets for my colleagues and I to go to this food event that I'd never heard of before. And I didn't even know food events existed, to be honest with you, called Alex's Lemonade. And it was held at UCLA. And I had asked her, I was like, what's Alex's Lemonade? And she's like, oh, well, it's a charity fundraiser. This little girl named Alex, she had a lemonade stand. She had cancer, and so she raised funds. And ultimately, she did end up passing. But her parents created this nonprofit, and it has grown into this where chefs from all over come together. They have lemonade stands, and they raise funds for pediatric cancer. I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing. That's incredible. What do we do there? I still didn't know what it was. I'm like, what do we do there? And she goes, oh, well, you just eat and drink, and there's probably going to be music. I was like, oh, I can do that. I love all those things. So that was my first week in LA, and we went to Alex's Lemonade, and my mind was blown. All this amazing food, and I didn't really grow up watching Food Network by a lot. We didn't receive, my parents, we didn't have cable television. We had our first satellite dish when I think I was in 8th or 9th grade, but I was watching MTV. I was definitely not watching food shows. And I didn't realize that at Alex's Lemonade, there were a lot of people in the food industry that are on television and things like that. I just didn't know. And so being there it was so awesome. And how I got to New Orleans was I ended up meeting he's now my ex-boyfriend, but I ended up dating this man who's a chef, and he had a lemonade stand, and I was in line for his food, and the rest is kind of history. And a couple months later, I moved to New Orleans, and I've lived here ever since. And so my life kind of happened very quick. I left Alaska in May of 2016. By September of 2016, I was in LA. And then by December, I was living full time in New Orleans. And so, and that foray, that jump into the food world and receiving what I consider an intimate access into the food world in terms of not just restaurants, but also what it's like to experience the food world on television and how the inner workings of that are. I'm a very observant person. And so because of that access, I was able to attend a lot of these different food and wine events, whether they were, New York Food and Wine or Nirvana in Arizona. I realized there were a lot of chefs out there that had nonprofits, or they themselves were heavily involved in philanthropic organizations. And what also came to light too was, that's when I started noticing that there is a lack of cultural and gender representation in this industry. And what I noticed too is a lot of, chefs that are, let's say they're doing really well. Well, I noticed that a lot of their backup house, they were all brown, and brown people, brown men, brown women. And it got me thinking, well, where's the recognition for people who work in the backup house? Is a line cook always going to be a line cook? Do they ever rise up in ranks? Are people working for chef-driven restaurants, or are they working for owner-driven restaurants? And so it was very interesting to do a deep dive into the restaurant and hospitality industry in that regard, and just realizing that there is a complete lack of cultural and gender representation. And it got me thinking about where I grew up in Alaska, where, I'm Indigenous Alaska Native, and our state, we have a lot of different Native tribes, and it just got me thinking, well, as a woman growing up in Alaska, I didn't really see any cultural representation at any of the restaurants that I went to. I definitely didn't see any of the traditional Native foods or maybe ingredients that my mother, would be served in our home. I didn't see those in the industry. And then it got me thinking, well, where are the women at? Where are the ladies at? And so that was also a huge part into forming the Dipping Spoon Foundation, was, realizing that lack of cultural and gender representation, and also, that income inequality, and higher living wages and all the things, and just realizing, it starts young. Culinary school that's education, just as much as going to a 4-year university degree program is. And so I think that a lot of people I don't know, maybe a lot of people don't forget, but culinary school is an education. You're working with your hands, and it goes back to what I was saying, watching my mother in the kitchen, watching her work with her hands. That's a skill, that's a life trade that no one can take away from you. And so as I've created the foundation, just that reminder of, you have a life skill, no one can take this away from you, and let's bring cultural and gender representation in the kitchen. Let's advocate for higher living wages, because that's a return on investment. And I firmly believe if we're not investing in our youth, then what are we investing in? And when we invest in our community, that's what we're investing in. We're investing in our youth, which is a return, I believe, on our investment as a community as a whole.
One of the questions I typically ask is how can the public get to know who you are through your work? And what I'm hearing and what's great is who you are and how you grew up and the influences in your life are just interwoven into your work. And, so people will never be confused about what's important to you and why it's important to you. And then how, you and what you expect and the response you expect from the world, when you put this effort forth. I'm always curious about how people kind of zero in on a very specific demographic of people, because if your message is trying to affect everyone and trying to inspire or enrage or whatever your goals are, if you're trying to, hit everybody, you typically hit no one, and then your message gets really muddled and watered down. And what you want is something that's concentrated. So if you do need to dilute it, you don't lose anything. So how did you connect with a community first? And, what stories and experiences really resonate with you the deepest that, have you specifically kind of targeting this very specific group of people?
Well, that's a great question. And I think for me, it just goes back to representation. As a little girl growing up in Wasilla, Alaska, biracial Charity, sitting at home in her bedroom with all these pictures hanging on her wall, all these books, what I did not see was a little girl in the media, a little girl that looked exactly like me. That did not exist. And so, but I never let that inhibit what I wanted to do for myself in the world, or what I wanted to do at school. And I think I had really, really great mentors when I was in middle school and high school. I was a huge student government nerd, and I remember telling my student government advisor, Miss Judy Bradberg, I was like, Miss B, I want to run for student body president. I want to run for state vice president, and I want to win. I'm going to win, but I'm kind of scared because what if people don't vote for me because I look like I do? And she was like, oh, pish posh, just run. You're great. You're amazing. You have lived in experience because you come from a marginalized background. She just broke it down for me. And I am so thankful and grateful for her guidance, because it goes back to, I did not see myself or anyone that looked like me in those areas where I thought where I knew I had power, but I was too afraid to step into it. And so as I've gone living my life, whether or not it was co-founding businesses, I remember co-founding a business with my ex-business partner. We started a high-end activewear boutique in Alaska, the first of its kind. And I went to work. I loved my job. I loved my store, but I purposely went to work every day to be the example for my nieces, for my nephews, so that they could see, if your auntie can do it, if your auntie can co-found a business, a small business, then you can do anything. And so, because I didn't see what I was looking for, I was willing to create that, and I didn't care how it took, what I needed to do to make it happen. I was going to do it. And I think now in my life, with the foundation and finding my new pivot, it just goes back to, I believe representation matters in all aspects of life. And I think that no matter what industry you're in, representation should be there, and it needs to be reflective of the world around us. The world is changing. Perhaps when I was a child, America was pretty white, but now it's not. And so when I see companies or marketing campaigns that aren't reflective of the world around us, I believe that those companies, those industries, those places, they're doing themselves a great disservice by not really opening up their eyes and realizing that the world has changed. You're now in, the dark ages, and this is what the world looks like now. It's full of representation in all aspects. And what that goes back to, I believe, is that inclusive connection. And so as I continue to live my life and create the things to, I guess, what I would love to do is just remind little girls that look like me, my nieces, my nephews, that if your auntie can do it, you can do it. It doesn't matter what you look like. It doesn't matter what background you have, how far away you lived from the lower 48 or the mainland. You can do it. And so I just think it goes back to representation. And my Miss Judy Bradberg, my mentor in high school, she was totally right. I have lived in experience as a Black woman, as an Indigenous woman. So that means I'm an expert in. If I'm an expert in that, then okay, well then I'm going to take what I know, and I'm going to create something amazing so that other people can realize, like, hey, you don't get to tell me what my narrative is. I'm telling you because I'm an expert in my culture and my womanhood. So you don't get to tell me anymore what you believe Black culture is, Indigenous culture. At the end of the day, you don't know culture because you don't have culture, because you've been appropriating culture. So let me tell you what culture is.
Exactly. Well, thank you, Miss Judy. It's because that lesson is a really interesting one to learn. I think we hear it, but it doesn't really rest in us for a little while. The idea of you are an expert at your life and at your experiences, because we are always, the narrative around education and experience has always been centered. Whiteness has always been centered. And so this idea that, understanding Eurocentric cultures is understanding culture, and anything outside of that is okay, but it holds no value. So why would you waste time? And so that really messes with your self-confidence. I think a lot of the things that we Black women struggle with around kind of imposter syndrome and stuff like that lives in that space of, you're told that your experiences are discounted as not as valuable as, and so you don't invest time in understanding them and celebrating them and appreciating them. And part of my motivation for starting the podcast is for not just the audience to hear your stories, but for you to hear them. Sometimes we kind of go through life achieving because that's what we're told to do, because also because it's indoctrinated specifically in Black and Indigenous women that your labor and what you produce is the only way you hold value in this society. So we spend so much of our lives producing, and then when it's time to tell our stories, we are challenged because it's like, I don't have a story. I don't think it's not been worth it to me to think about my story or my experiences unless there is a trauma to be exploited. So, our traumas are valuable to the rest of the world as a narrative. They're sold in movies, they're sold in books. Black women as victims of slavery and sexual assault and exploitation and all of those things are sold as fiction, and they make a tremendous amount of money for people who don't look like us. And so when you start to talk to Black women and Indigenous women about their successes and about their hard work benefiting their own communities and people who look like them and sound like them and share similar experiences, most people are like, well, no one really wants to hear about that. And you're like, but they want to hear about yours? Okay, well, bye.
Oh my gosh, yes. I completely, you have no idea how much that resonates with me, because I remember before I created the Tipping Spoon Foundation, I had shared my why, about why I wanted to start it. And I literally had a woman say to my face, who also works in the industry in a different capacity, well, I don't see what the benefit is in it. She said this to my face, and I could not believe the boldness in this woman to tell me to my face that my culture essentially didn't matter and that there's no benefit in it. And what I'm hearing is there's no benefit in it for you because you don't know how you can make money off of this. And I was like, I immediately wrote her off and realized, you know what? I'm going to stick with my people. I'm going to continue to be unapologetically me, because by being unapologetically me, it makes me unapologetically great and raw. I respond to stimulus, and I want to continue to do that. And, I think that we're living in a world now where, especially now in terms of the pandemic and the summer with Black Lives Matter and racial injustice, we're really seeing that, we are humanizing experiences and realizing that our narratives are so important. And our narratives are what fosters real, long-lasting, sustainable change, especially in the world we're living in now.
Exactly. I know I was having a conversation yesterday with the host of, it's a radio show called The Scenario. And the question was, what are you grateful for? And like my first caveat for anything is always to kind of create context, because my answer might not be usual. So I talked about what gratitude actually is. And then, my response to what am I grateful for is, like, specifically this year was this idea that we have an opportunity. And, for me, I don't ever want people to think like you have to do these things, but we have been presented with a year-long opportunity to deal with ourselves and deal with the world in truth. And up until, we have spent so much time not doing so because we haven't had to just to deal with each other truthfully, to deal with yourself honestly. And, because there's a tremendous amount of distraction, work and ambitions and education and relationships. And there's all these things in the outside world that pull you away from this opportunity, because dealing with yourself honestly and dealing with the world honestly takes work, and it takes a certain amount of strength and fearlessness. And so having to pause all of the extra activity, and to now look at us as a society and as a community and kind of face these harder truths that we have not decided to deal with. And, to first start to deal with the truths of ourselves, and then to deal with how those truths affect the greater whole. So like back to like this idea of these concepts and these challenges around race relationships, and how that social contract has never been valid because no one, you've never held up your end. So I've never been required to hold up mine. To deal with that truth that you broke, that the social contract was broken long ago. And, and now that we're in this space of, people are like, yeah, we're dealing with like a racial reckoning. I'm like, no, we're dealing with a racial truth. We're dealing in truths with each other. Not that people are, we're not going to, for me, it's like, you're not going to magically find people who aren't racist. Being anti-racist is work, and it requires a dismantling of your entire life, your entire foundation. There are people where being racist and having a white supremacist mindset is at their core. It's the central theme to their life. And they don't realize that it is no one's told them that it's like morally repugnant. No one's told them that it's oppressive to other people, because they've only ever been shown the benefit. And so to deal with a person in truth, helping, to understand that not everyone is going to view racism as a bad thing. Not everyone's going to view nationalism as a bad thing, as a thing that is not advantageous, that does not help us win. So to understand, to deal with each other honestly, it's kind of like, okay, well, look, I know I want you to be anti-racist because of a number of reasons, not just because you won't oppress me, but you won't oppress yourself. Racism destroys the person that it lives in as well. So, I want you to live a better life, but if but you can't force that on anybody. So at the very least, we can deal with each other truthfully. So if I'm going to sit in a room with you, fully understanding that you are a racist person and this is how you see the world, then I know how to listen and adjust my behavior. I know how to engage with you. The challenge has always been that people have lived in a very racist system, with a very racist life, with a very racist ideology, but they have been quiet about it. They haven't expressed it. It shows up in other places. So for me, it's like, look, Tony is that you're dealing with each other truthfully and honestly, and dealing with ourselves honestly. Hey, I know racism exists in the world. I don't think it's such a bad thing. I just thought people should know. Like, I would rather have that because if you think about the way like activities have conspired, anything from lynchings to cross burnings to things like that. Like, you've got guys in the KKK showing up with hoods on because you can't deal with them honestly. Like, just be out there about your racism. Everybody else is like, why you got a hood on? There's no need to cover your face. If you feel like this is a righteous act, why cover your face? Because there's a falseness here. There's an inauthenticity here. There's a place where you are not dealing with yourself honestly. And therefore, you're never going to be able to deal with me honestly.
Yeah, completely. I feel like the covering of faces, and this is my personal opinion, I just feel like maybe I'm giving people too much benefit of the doubt here, but when you show up in a white hood of some sort and you're covering your face, I just feel like you have to know that what you believe and stand for is wrong, and that there's a sense of shame in that, and you're shamed so much you're willing to cover your identity so that no one knows who you are. And this summer, because I definitely remember, when Black Lives Matter hit, I was actually stuck in. I spent the summer in Hawaii actually, and when I landed, I was stuck in government ordered quarantine. So when I left mainland, the day I landed in Hawaii, the Lower 48 was basically a civil war, and I was like, oh my God, what's going on? But I really wanted to march. I wanted to get out there, be vocal. But I couldn't because I was stuck in government ordered quarantine in Oahu. And so I stayed in my hotel room. My Airbnb for 2 weeks. I could hear the marches in Waikiki and all the things. And I was very, very active on social media and sharing my truth and sharing the truth of what it was like to grow up in Alaska, in Wasilla. And then thinking about, the people that I know that are covering their faces with these white hoods. And I'm thinking, you know what? I'm going to call you out, and I'm going to let you sit in your shame and let it stew, because the stew to me it's been cold for so long, and I don't like cold soup. So I'm going to remake that soup and let you sit in it. And I think that's what has happened this summer to a lot of people that typically would hide behind their racism. And it's like, no. No more cold soup. I just made a new batch. And you're sitting right in the center of it,
And we've had the luxury of hiding behind screens for just about a decade now. And so that was for me like kind of a new version of just a mask, of hiding your face, of a new white hood, is being able to hide behind your computer screen or your phone screen and do your damage. And so like again, like we get to sit in this space now in 2020 of, okay, first, what is the truth of myself? And then how does that truth bleed into the rest of the world? And does that feed or harm, or what does it do? Because, for me at this point, it's less about judging those spaces, because that comes later, but it's more about just kind of facing those realities like, oh, I have, because even for people in Black communities and Indigenous communities that have absorbed kind of that white supremacist messaging and who kind of live with that central in their own lives. And people are like, well, how is that possible? I'm like, because if you are an oppressed people, it's always the oppressor's ideology that surrounds you. And, the people who reject it have a hard time because, it's taxing on the mind and the heart and the body. There are those who go, I think for me, it's easier to just go with the flow. And, it's easy from the other side to go with the flow. Can't you see what that person's doing? And I'm like, yeah, I don't think we're in a space that people don't understand what's happening to them. I think people are very clear about what's happening to them. I think the decisions being made are, how am I going to engage in it? What do I feel is safest and healthiest for me? And some people, they're like, well, I feel like the safest space for me is in the middle of it and sitting in it and being, your Candace Owenses and stuff like that. It's just like, okay, because you think about the traumas that a lot of those folks have suffered, like a lot of the damage that has been done to them. And so for her response to overt racism and the attack on her actual person was to sit in the middle of white supremacy because she thought it was safer there. It was like, well, obviously it is not.
Yeah, it's wild to me. I call that when you've internalized the Wonder Bread, and we all know what Wonder Bread tastes like. Wonder Bread tastes like shit.
You out here with we go like with peak Stockholm syndrome. It's just like, you know what? But historically, you're always going to have that group of folks. Historically, it's always going to be, well, in order to not get whipped by the master, in order not to be brutalized by the master, in order to reduce, not to eliminate, just to reduce the suffering at their hands, I will be on their side. I will do their bidding, because what's safest for me is to sit under their shadow instead of to sit in opposition. So yeah, it's just, I think this year has been that year of like, what is the truth? Not what do you want the truth to be, not what do you hope the truth to be, not the truth you made up. What is the actual truth that we're dealing with? Because when we come out on the other side of this and people can engage with each other in person, we are going to have to deal with each other honestly, physically again. And it's going to be like, I'm sitting in this room and, for me, it's like, I'm sitting in a room with 20, 30 white women, I know and understand that 10 or 15 of these women voted for Donald Trump. And that's just the reality I'm going to have to sit in, because that's what the numbers say. That's what the truth says, that the percentage is that half of them likely voted for Donald Trump. What are the implications of that for me? What do I do with that? And I think those are the questions we're going to have to ask ourselves, because it's going to be a lot easier to deal with sitting in the house because we don't have to engage directly anymore, but to sit in the room with someone and kind of like that reality rest, like really like a thick blanket. You kind of go, okay, so then what are we doing with each other then? Then how are we going to engage with each other? How do we do what human beings do, which is be in relationship with each other. So yeah, see what I say, this hour always go by real quick. So of course you ended up on my radar for two reasons. One is because I am creating a series for next season around Black and Indigenous women, because I need to put the focus there, because I find like yourself, those stories are not being told, those voices are not being amplified. And I did a spread for Millie Magazine that focused on women in those particular who live in those intersections, and it just was like, you know what, I think it's time. Also, of course, we share our Black food folks in Talenti grant scenarios together, finding ourselves on the same list. So I was like, okay, so that just means that, the universe is like, hey, go ahead and have a conversation. So knowing that, that you have this kind of windfall of funding and resource coming into your space, did you have something that you were like kind of planning and waiting to see, where those resources would come from for you to move on those? And then my other question was like the name, The Dipping Spoon, which I thought it's definitely a fantastic name. I mean, marketing wise and branding wise, like that, that all my spidey senses were tingling on that one. I was like, this is a great name. So I would love to hear about like future plans for The Dipping Spoon, and then, the name and like what inspired the name.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Well, I'll start with the name. So my Indigenous Yupik name is Galutak, and Galutak means dipping spoon. And the literal meaning of dipping spoon is from one dip, you serve other people, dip into water, and the water is given to everybody. It grows and keeps going. And when I knew I wanted to do this, I was like, you know what? I'm going to name the foundation the Dipping Spoon Foundation, because this is inherently who I am. And I believe this is what I'm providing. And water is infinite. And I just felt like it was very serendipitous, and I love my native name. And I actually have a twin brother, and his name's Peter, but his Yupik name is Uchgach. And Uchgach means bowl. So he's the bowl and I'm the spoon, which I think is quite cute. And so that's where the name came from. I was named after an ancestor on my mother's side of the family. And so their name was Galutak. And now in terms of just where I'm at with funding and going forward, before the pandemic hit, the Dipping Spoon Foundation, I was planning in-person events here in New Orleans. I had a event 2 years ago in Alaska and had a private pop-up dinner just to test the market up there. Because ultimately what I would love to do, Alaska does not have a food and wine event like, let's say, New York Food and Wine, Sobe Food and Wine in Miami. And so I was like, you know what? I want to create Alaska's first major food, wine, and music festival. And the Dipping Spoon Foundation will be that foundation to do it. And so I tested the water a couple years ago by doing a pop-up dinner with my then ex-partner, and we put this beautiful dinner together just to test the market to see, well, would Alaskans be willing to, would they be open to this? Would they be receptive to it? Do they believe in culture and gender representation? And sure enough, we sold out of those dinners quite quickly, and I realized, yes, I feel completely validated in my work. And so for the year 2020, I had been planning in-person events in New Orleans, Alaska, and then I had an intention of growing the foundation also in Hawaii, because Indigenous cultures everywhere. And like I said, my parents retired to Hawaii, gosh, it was 10, 15 years ago or so. And Hawaii, my little sister grew up there to a degree. So I feel like I have so many different parts of me that feel like home: Alaska, New Orleans, Hawaii. And when the pandemic hit and everything was shut down, all of my in-person events were canceled, and I definitely wallowed in self-pity for a while. Lots of crying, lots of what am I going to do? We were just about to fundraise, created some strategic partnerships, but then I lost all those partnerships because everyone was trying to save their funds, funnel their funds where they needed to go. And I was really unsure where our future was going. And so, like I said, this summer when I was stuck in quarantine, I was very, very active on social. And my motto was say something. And if people don't respond, then tag them in something. And if people don't respond, then spam something. And so that's what I did. And because of that, that's how actually I became connected through Black food folks with Colleen and other different food publications out there because of how vocal I was. Because I wasn't thinking about myself really. It was, what about those restaurants? What about the wine companies that they're small business owners and they're Black, they're Indigenous, they're people of color. What is happening to them? I know what's happening to them. They're going to have to shut down. They'll probably never open. And I bet, and some of these businesses, restaurants, what have you, they look up to so many different food and media publications or organizations. And what I saw was some of these organizations, they weren't doing anything to help BIPOC communities. And so I said something, I tagged them in something, and I spammed something. And so I feel like my activism is what set me up for this grant with Black food folks and Talenti, and it really continued to validate my why, and also validate, Charity, you may not have been able to raise what you thought you were going to raise at the beginning of the year, but you kept your purpose, and your purpose is more than a marketing dollar, and your why is your fuel. Your purpose is what you do. And it's not about what you say, it's about what you do. And because you are doing the work, and your strategic partnerships will come. Just keep being unapologetically you. And I feel like that's exactly what has happened. And doors have started to open for the Tipping Spoon Foundation with pivots in the future that I'm pursuing. And then also, just doors of just personal and professional and spiritual growth as well this year. So I definitely, as hard as 2020 has been with life transitions, I very feel like this year, for me anyway, it was definitely needed. And I'm excited for 2021 because I have so many goals. I still want to bring Alaska's first food and wine festival to the Tipping Spoon Foundation. I have a goal. I live in New Orleans. I live in Louisiana, which is a predominantly Black state in a predominantly Black city. Essence Fest is here every year. I want the Tipping Spoon Foundation and Essence Fest to team up. I want us to amplify Black voices, Black chefs, female leaders, incoming recipients. I want to bring them on stage and talk about them. I think there's no reason why Essence, they amplify it certainly, so I've gone to Essence Fest a couple times, Black voices, but I just feel like let's create a culinary aspect, and you know what? I'm willing to do that for you. So I would love to team up with Essence, and
there was, do you remember the Essence cover kind of it wasn't a contest, but it was it was a trend. It was like an Instagram type of thing where it was put yourself on the cover of Essence, and you could do it in your Instagram stories as it felt. Yeah. So I was like, oh, well, this seems fun. And my graphic design life popped up. And so I had done 3 or 4 potential covers for Essence using people who work in food, centralizing their images. And so, of course, everyone was like, oh, okay, you need to go ahead and tag Essence, because Essence has a terrible food and wine, a terrible food and beverage section. It's just not doing enough.
I agree with you for sure. I was like, where is their culinary aspect? They don't have one. You know what? Partner with Tipping Spoon. I'm willing to curate and do that for you. Let's send kids to school. Let's amplify those voices. We're everywhere.
There's just there's so many incredible food writers that are, Black and Indigenous food writers. There are really incredible chefs and recipe developers. The space is huge and ripe with talent. And so there's just no reason not to have a very robust and energetic food section for Essence. I feel like Black food is American food. It's the, Indigenous food is American food. We are the foundations of how we eat in this country. And so we should absolutely have something going on. I mean, it's been great to see the publications that are coming down the pipeline right now. I mean, you've got For the Culture with Clancy Miller. You've got While Entertaining. So there's a couple of food magazines coming up. Whetstone, of course, with Steven Satterfield. Like, all of these publications need attention, and they need eyes on them. They need people. They need readership. Period. And because you've got your Bon Appetits and your Food and Wines and your Savoirs, and you've got all of those, and some of them do better than others at being very global, but not necessarily focusing on like Black and Indigenous foodways, which are essentially American foodways. So for me, it's like, where are those? Why aren't we vigorously telling those stories? Because it's essentially the centerpiece of how we eat and why we eat what we eat. So yeah, I feel like Essence definitely needs to make its way into some conversations and partnerships and relationships with organizations like your own. Organizations like Black Food Folks. Like, can we?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think Essence could have such a really great presence in that, and the fact that it's in New Orleans every single year. I'm thinking, hey, like, let's curate some really, really great events. And so, yeah, I have a lot of things that a lot of people in the industry that I really would love to work with and partner with to just not only elevate Black and Indigenous stories, but everyone loves food. Food unites us all. It's the language we speak. Let's amplify it more and get it out there. And, and people talk about education, and culinary school is education. Let's provide skills. Let's provide a trade. Why are we inhibiting Black art? Why are we inhibiting Indigenous art? Because chefs are artists.
Exactly. So we could go off on another hour of like talking about plans and future plans and things like that. But for the time, I know I'm always like, okay, I could go. There's plenty to deep dive into. For now, how and what are the best ways to reach you, support you, promote the Dipping Spoon, and then of course engage with your work and partner with you? I know there are partnerships that probably are just the universe is just waiting for that timing. But if someone wants to reach out to you and be like, hey, I think we could do something great together, like, what's the best way to get in touch with you and to again amplify your work?
The best way to get in touch with me is definitely I'm very active on my personal Instagram at Simply Charity, but then also our Dipping Spoon Foundation website. My email there is info@dippingspoon.org, and there's a lot of our information there. But our donate page is live. I'm a fellow of Vital Voices, which is a company based out of DC, and they have graciously tapped me to be, they're my fiscal sponsor, which is really, really awesome. And so as I was saying a little bit earlier, just after the pandemic hit, I was just thinking, oh my gosh, how are we going to raise funds? And so now that I feel like as we're speaking, we can take donations today, tomorrow, but I think one thing in my imposter syndrome that I have a really hard time doing is asking people for help, and that means asking people to give a little bit, and no matter whether or not it's their time or if they can, monetary things, and just remembering like the why. And I believe that, that why is just for amplifying voices that typically have not been amplified, and creating culture and gender representation in spaces that typically and historically don't really have voices or seats at the table. And it's okay if there's no seats at the table. I'm just going to create that door and that space in that building myself. I don't need to sit at your table. We're going to make our own. And so I definitely, I'm getting a little emotional because I just think about, all the things that weren't there, like I said, access, all the things that weren't available to me when I was younger, and just creating that space for people to be authentically themselves, especially in this industry. And so the work I'm doing, I feel so validated with the Dipping Spoon Foundation, and I'm starting to be a little bit more active on our Dipping Spoon. We do have an Instagram, and I'm trying to get better at being active on Instagram through the foundation page. But my personal page is where I'm pretty much out there, always sharing my story. And that's another thing, is sharing who you are, meaning your story about who makes you you, that's really, really vulnerable. But I remind myself that all vulnerability is courage. And so I definitely have the courage to share who I am. And that means the great things and the bad things. And so I think that just facilitates what makes Charity Blanchett Charity, and then why the Dipping Spoon Foundation is there. So people can reach us, like I said, through Insta, but definitely our website, and our donation page is always live. It's there. And I think having conversations like this, just that also, I think, facilitates the growth of much more dialogue into the purpose and the why of why organizations like you and I, or women like us, what we're doing and why it exists.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and I'll be sure, like on the interview page or the podcast page, there'll definitely be a link to your donation page and to the website and to all of these social media links. So yeah, I am a big proponent. I also have struggled in life and continue to work on this space of asking for help. Again, I think it's always tied to the value of what you're doing and how you feel about what that is. So a lot of times, it's Black women and Indigenous women, we just kind of go, we'll do it ourselves. It's fine. I'll get it done. It's okay. Well, because that's what we're used to, that space. And so there's a point though where you're kind of like, okay, I have my ambitions and goals are bigger than my resources right now. So how can I enlarge my resources? And that's usually when you have to kind of go, okay, I guess I need to start asking other people, because it's precarious. You're just like, oh, okay, I have to put this request in the hands of someone and trust that they will come through. And something I've learned, because like right now I'm fundraising for season 4 of the podcast. And I've gotten to a point where the way it has grown, I am no longer, I can no longer be its sole resource. So I had to go, okay, how do I ask for help in a way that feels authentic and that feels right? And so, like crowdfunding is always a bit of a challenge because you're just, you're constantly trying to keep people motivated and keep people in front of the messaging and that kind of thing. And when you start to see those contributions slow down, you're kind of, you try not to, link that to your self-value and to the value of what you do. And you want to, try to divorce those two things as much as possible. And so it's just one of those things where it's kind of like, okay, but I understand, I know why I had to take this particular step because I know how I want this to go. I know the direction this deserves to go in, and it needs a bigger resource. And so, definitely it's been a year of unlearning what I thought I knew about asking for help. It's been oh God, girl. And then unlearning this idea of, or the behavior of underestimating people, which always speaks to trust. And for me, it's just like, Black women have put our lives and our work in the hands of the public, in the hands of our community, in the hands of our partners and our families and friends. And very often that trust is broken and abused and exploited. And so we go back to just kind of protecting ourselves and our work and our ambitions and our plans, in order to avoid destruction, and not necessarily because we want to, but it's like, hey, how many times am I going to cast my pearl before swine? And it'd be trampled over. I'm just not going to do that anymore. So like right now, it's always trying to just unlearn that fear of, okay, people care about me. People care about the work. I have to give them an opportunity to step up. I have to give them the opportunity to rise to the occasion. I can't underestimate them and assume that they are disinterested and would not, and don't find value in what I do. And so, yeah, so it's been a year really unlearning of that for sure.
Yeah, I think too, when I think about asking people for help, or organizations that I think, what, if they teamed up with us, it's such a powerhouse. It makes so much sense. But then when I think of, writing that cold email or reaching out via DM or something, I feel like, that imposter syndrome steps in, and then also a sense of pride. Like I feel like, well, if I'm asking someone for help or to donate, does that mean that, like, I don't want to seem like I'm, how am I trying to say this? But just that pride of, well, these resources should be available to me already, but they're not. And so me asking, I feel like that kind of makes me look like I don't have, essentially, I guess I don't have my shit together, but I do, and I don't like feeling in a place of, well, if I ask someone for help, am I beholden to them now? Do they now own my concept and my idea, And then that's when you keep things so close because you just care about that integrity of what you're doing. And I think just remembering, for me anyways, taking that pride away and remembering, you know what, you're going to get a lot of no's before you get that yes. And when you finally get that yes, then more are going to trickle in. So I think, for me, definitely, I've had to put my pride away and just be me.
And that is all for today's episode. This has been the Afros and Knives podcast with Tiffany Rozier. And I want to extend a huge thank you to my guest this week and to you, the audience, for tuning in. I love this community of listeners and I am so grateful for your support. If you love this podcast, you can show your support by subscribing, sharing, and rating this podcast wherever you listen. I mean, how many times can I say podcasts? Just rate the show wherever you're listening, whether that be Apple Podcast, Spotify, Stitcher, Luminary, I think we're on 11 platforms now. You can also, one thing I would love to see this season is for folks to leave comments on the episode pages on the website. So be sure to visit the Afros and Knives website, which is afrosandknives.com. And when you're there, you can become a member, you can sign up for the newsletter, and you can leave comments for my guests and for myself on their interview pages. If you've never been to the website before, each interview has a page that's dedicated to it. It features our guest. It gives you more information about who they are, maybe their product or service or organization, and how you can get connected. So there's just a lot more information there for after the show. And so I encourage you to check out the website and get engaged a bit there, because there's just so much more to offer and a lot more value that can be added to the podcast. You can also watch all of the interviews that are in video on the podcast on the website as well. There is a dedicated video channel on Vimeo, but it's definitely a lot easier to just jump on the website and watch the podcast happen. Let's see what else. Be sure to sign up for the newsletter. It'll let you know who's going to be on the show. It will also feature their 5-minute interview. If you don't know about the 5-minute interview, again, go to the website. It'll tell you all about it. If you would like to participate in the 5-minute interview, that's where you can sign up for that as well. Thank you so much for listening in this week. I hope you found it valuable and interesting. And as I continue to bring these episodes, definitely, find me on Instagram at Afros and Knives, and if you want to nominate someone for the show, if you want to reach out and ask about how to be on the show yourself, that is definitely the place to do it. So take care of yourselves, and until next week, may you be happy, may you be safe, may you be healthy, may you be at peace.